What if the biggest stars of Hollywood's golden age were actually terrible actors, while critics savagely tore apart performances, calling them wooden and lifeless? Audiences didn't care. These stars built empires on everything except acting ability, proving that sometimes charisma trumps talent. Hunter was the quintessential 1950s teen idol, but critics absolutely destroyed his performances. Born Arthur Gallion, he was transformed by agent Henry Wilson into the perfect all-American dream boy. Critics consistently called his performances wooden and lifeless, with one reviewer noting that Hunter delivers his lines like someone who's memorized them phonetically without understanding their meaning. In mockery, despite being the lead, critics noted he was completely overshadowed by his more experienced co-stars, with one writing that Hunter stands around looking wholesome while actual actors create characters around him. His emotional range was brutally mocked with Variety, observing that Hunter's emotional range extends from mildly cheerful to slightly less cheerful. When he left Warner Brothers, his roles immediately went to Troy Donahue, another manufactured heartthrob. Critics joke that Hunter acted like someone who's surprised to find himself in movies and isn't quite sure what he's supposed to be doing yet. Teenage audiences adored his clean-cut image, making him one of the most popular stars of his era. His comeback in John Waters' Polyester, decades later, showed he finally learned to embrace the joke. Hunter's story proves that sometimes being perfectly cast as yourself is enough. Troy Donahue was Tab Hunter's replacement at Warner Brothers, and critics were equally vicious about his acting abilities. Born Merle Johnson Jr., he was another Henry Wilson creation who looked perfect but acted terribly. Critics consistently described his performances as vacant and empty, with one reviewer noting that Donahue delivers his lines like someone who's just woken up and isn't sure where he is. His breakthrough film, A Summer Place, made him a teen idol, but critics were merciless. The director later admitted it took 11 or 12 takes before you could get anything out of him. Critics wrote that Donahue's performances suggest someone who's very handsome but perpetually lost, and that watching him attempt to be passionate is like watching someone try to solve a difficult math problem while pretending to be in love. Journalist Rick Dubrow wrote devastatingly that Troy is big and strong, and has the rare ability to make the most glamorous and exciting events seem colorless and flat. His co-stars described him as isolated and uncomfortable, with many noting he seemed more interested in his appearance than his performance. Despite the critical savaging, Donahue's films were box office hits, particularly with teenage girls who found his sensitive, vulnerable appearance irresistible. His later struggles with addiction and homelessness showed the dark side of manufactured stardom. Donahue's career proved that sometimes looking the part matters more than playing it convincingly. Rock Hudson was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, but critics consistently questioned his acting abilities throughout his career. Early in his career, he was famously almost fired from his first film for being unable to deliver lines coherently, freezing up completely during filming. Critics regularly described his performances as wooden and mechanical, with one reviewer noting that Hudson acts like someone who's been given detailed instructions on how to be a movie star, but forgot to learn how to be human and all that heaven allows. Despite being the romantic lead, critics observe that Hudson is handsome and somewhat wooden, laconic of speech, and it's at times hard to understand his passion for the widow. His idea of conveying emotion was described by critics as speaking slightly louder and opening his eyes a bit wider. The New York Times noted his artificial screen presence and suggested his success came from his appearance rather than talent. Critics consistently pointed out his mechanical performances and questioned whether his bland competence constituted real acting ability. One critic wrote that Hudson delivers his lines with the conviction of someone reading from a teleprompter, which may be exactly what he's doing, yet Hudson's classical good looks and reliable screen presence made him a bankable star for decades. His success in Douglas Sirk melodramas and later comedies with Doris Day proved that audiences loved him regardless of critical opinion. Hudson's career demonstrated that sometimes being consistently competent and incredibly handsome is enough to build a legendary career. Victor Mature stands apart from other critically mocked actors because he was completely aware of his limitations and embraced them with humor. When rejected by the Los Angeles Country Club for being an actor, he famously quipped, "I'm not an actor, and I've got 64 films to prove it." Critics consistently called his performances wooden and suggested he poses rather than performs, with one noting that Mature acts like someone who's been told that speaking louder makes lines more dramatic. In biblical epics like Samson and Delilah, critics observed that he delivered lines about biblical drama with the same enthusiasm he might use to discuss his workout routine. His dramatic abilities were questioned throughout his career, with critics noting his discomfort with romantic scenes and suggesting he seemed more interested in showing off his physique than creating emotional connections with his co-stars. Yet Mature's honest acknowledgement of his limitations made him more endearing than stars who took themselves too seriously. He once said, "Actually, I am a golfer. That is my real occupation. I never was an actor. Ask anybody." Particularly the critics. Critics today actually admire his work in films like My Darling Clementine and Kiss of Death, recognizing that his natural presence and authenticity serve certain roles. Perfectly mature success proved that sometimes being genuinely yourself, limitations and all, resonates more powerfully than trying to be something you're not. His self-deprecating attitude and professional reliability made him a valuable star despite critical dismissal. John Wayne faced constant criticism throughout his career for his limited range and tendency to play essentially the same character in different settings. Critics noted that Wayne doesn't act, he just shows up and is John Wayne, with reviewers complaining that whether he was playing a cowboy soldier or even a Roman centurion, he approached every role with the same draw and swagger. In The Quiet Man, critics acknowledged the film's charm, but noted that Wayne tries to be charming, but charm requires lightness he simply doesn't possess. Critics were particularly harsh about his attempts at dramatic acting, with one reviewer writing that Wayne's Ethan Edwards is just John Wayne being angry instead of John Wayne being stoic. His performances were frequently described as one-note and inflexible, with critics suggesting he was more personality than actor. Contemporary reviewers found his performances limiting, though later critics would appreciate the complexity of films like The Searchers. Critics consistently complained that Wayne seemed to be playing George Wayne in different costumes rather than creating distinct characters, yet Wayne understood that audiences came to see John Wayne, not complex character studies. Where critics saw limitation, fans saw reliable masculinity and authentic American values. His consistency became his strength, and his iconic status proved that sometimes being perfectly yourself is more valuable than displaying range. Wayne's career demonstrated that star power and screen presence can matter more than traditional acting ability, and that audiences often prefer familiarity to unpredictability. Charlton H. was frequently criticized for his theatrical, over-the-top performances that critics found unsuited to film. Critics noted his bombastic delivery and suggested he acted like he was performing for the back row of a theater rather than movie cameras. They described him as hammy and overwrought, questioning whether his biblical, epic style translated effectively to more intimate dramas. In Touch of Evil, critics noted he was completely outclassed by Orson Welles' subtle direction and performance, with one writing that H acts like someone who thinks shouting equals passion and gesturing equals emotion. His tendency toward grandiose gestures was a frequent target, with The Hollywood Reporter observing that H approaches every scene as if he's delivering the Gettysburg Address to a crowd of thousands, even when he's supposed to be having an intimate conversation. Critics were particularly harsh about his attempts at contemporary roles, suggesting his theatrical style only worked in period pieces. One reviewer wrote that H in modern dress looks like someone who's lost at a costume party, yet H's commanding presence and stentorian voice perfectly suited the epic films that made him famous. Where critics saw overacting, audiences saw authority and gravitas appropriate to larger-than-life characters. His Oscar-winning performance in Ben-Hur proved that sometimes bigger really is better. H's success in spectaculars showed that different genres require different acting styles, and that what critics consider excessive can be exactly what certain stories need. His career proved that epic performances require epic actors. Audie Murphy, America's most decorated World War II soldier, was frequently criticized for his wooden acting despite his impressive real-life heroism. Critics noted that Murphy's authenticity in war scenes cannot compensate for his stiff delivery in dramatic moments, with reviewers suggesting his fame came from his war record rather than acting ability. Ironically, Into Hell and Back, where he played himself, see